Well, folks, we got a lot to dig in here. We got big news coming out of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. They have released their game plan for 2026. They got together last week and eventually released their game plan. And as we've covered in other videos, things do not look good for the Democrats going into the 2026 midterms in the Senate. And we will most likely see a Senate that will be held by the GOP throughout the whole Trump presidency. Let me repeat that again. We will most likely see the Senate held by the GOP through the entire Trump presidency. But hey, before we get into all this, if you're new here, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again. So, Tim Scott, who he is the South Carolina Republican senator, is the chief of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And Tim Scott came out and gave his game plan for 2026 over the weekend, where they were at a retreat in, I believe they were in Palm Beach, Florida. Unclear if they were at Mar-a-Lago or not. Just says Palm Beach, and I didn't really dig into that much more. And they released their list of where they're offensive and where they have to be on defense. Offensive, they see Georgia, Michigan, and New Hampshire. Those are where they're going on offense. And the three big defense is Maine, North Carolina, and Ohio, which I think most people going in, if you were to look at a Senate map here, that's most likely what you're going to see. If you are going to have, let's just say, here's your toss-ups, if we're being realistic. Here, the reality is and you know what, I don't even see Maine as a toss-up. I still see Maine as a lean Republican seat. But obviously, when in Georgia, you have John Ossoff won in 2021 in that runoff election against David Perdue. You have Tom Tillis in North Carolina. And even North Carolina, I'm going to say it's lean red. Trump was able to expand his margin in North Carolina in the last election relative to 2020. So I think the true toss-ups are going to come down to Wisconsin or Michigan and Georgia. New Hampshire, I'm going to keep that as a lean Democrat right now, just unless you have the right candidate there. Like Chris Sununu, he was a popular governor in New Hampshire. He wasn't in the MAGA world. He was much more liberal on some of his social policies. So if you have the right candidate in New Hampshire, but you'd kind of be in the same situation that you have in Maine, where you have a more centrist Republican like Susan Collins or someone like a Murkowski in Alaska, which is just wild because a Republican should be able to win Alaska by 20 points, and somehow how do we have Lisa Murkowski? But that's for something else. But really, Tim Scott expects in this midterm here that they are going to break spending records. With just a couple of these races, he thinks could cost upwards of $1 billion. He's told donors at the retreat that just for Senator Susan Collins, for her re-election, they could be looking at $600 million in spending. Just in Maine, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that's what, if that's the cost it is to hold the Senate, that's what the cost is going to be. There's going to be a high price tag for North Carolina most likely, and my guess is the Democrats are going to want to go on offensive. It's like if you're a Democrat looking at this map, you're going on defense mostly. You're defending Georgia, you're defending Michigan, you're defending New Hampshire. Where are you going on the offensive? And maybe a little bit in Minnesota. Where are you going on the offense? I'd say North Carolina, in Maine. I just think it would be a waste of money to put it into Ohio. Ohio is a Republican stronghold now. I don't think it's going to be, Sherrod Brown was maybe the last competitive Democrat that you were going to find in Ohio. Unless there's someone that we're not seeing at this point, I don't expect anything to change. I expect John Husted to win re-election. And if you're looking at what the predictions between, the Cook reporting, and then this other rating company, I'm unsure of who exactly they are. Let's see. Stuart Rothenberg. Okay, well, it's not giving me but right now it's like they're seeing, for Ohio, John Husted, solid red and likely red. Yeah, I agree. Where do I think that maybe outside of these offensive Georgia, Michigan, New Hampshire, where you could see the Republicans go on the offense? I think Minnesota. I think that if you had to throw a fourth one in there, I really think it's between New Mexico, Colorado, Virginia. I think Minnesota is your number 4 on that offensive list. I just don't think that the GOP is going to win there. They'd have to have a good quality candidate. Obviously, for the Senate against Amy Klobuchar, they ran Royce White, and he just got smoked. Amy Klobuchar, ran like 12 or 15 points ahead of Kamala Harris in Minnesota. And Kamala only won the state by a couple points in Minnesota. So I think that it could be competitive. It's going to come down to candidate quality in Minnesota. Who can the GOP recruit to run in that race? So we're gonna see what happens. Now, obviously, the Ohio election, that's a special election. John Husted filled J.D. Vance's seat when he was elected as vice president. Now he's got to run again to hold that seat for 6 years. But the Senate GOP arm, the fundraising arm, is off to a really, really good start so far. In January of 2025, the Senate GOP netted $8.5 million in January. That's the most money they've ever raised in a January in an off year. Now, after the 2024 Senate races, the GOP was able to flip 4 seats. They were able Montana, Ohio. We were able to get West Virginia. And where did we get another one? I'm blanking on it. Oh, Pennsylvania. Dave McCormick. How could we forget that? But after they were able to flip those 4 seats, they ended the cycle in about $24 million in debt. For probably the $1 billion that they spent, if you're $24 million in debt, that's not a great way to start it off, but ultimately you're going to do what you have to do. Now, Scott's mission, Tim Scott, is to get to a 55-seat majority in the Senate. That's really going to let us still have a 53-seat majority after you account for people who could drop out or go against President Trump like Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins from Maine. And I guess you could say 52 and you're going to have Kentucky. He won't be here anymore, actually. Hopefully McConnell will not run again. I would not be happy, let's put it that way. Just because we're on YouTube, I won't say it. But we're not going to be happy if Mitch McConnell decides to run again, and he needs to be primaried. Because it's like, did you see him? He was on 60 Minutes or Face the Nation or something recently. He's an old, frail man. There was videos of him trying to get escorted to his car in a wheelchair. It's like he could barely stand up on his own. Go back to Kentucky. Enjoy your time on the farm. But Scott's goal is to get 55 seats, and that runs directly through Michigan and Georgia, he sees. Obviously, we know that New Hampshire and Minnesota are going to be lean blue. That's just how it is. It's going to have to be, Trump's going to have a really good first 2 years for those two to be really, really, really competitive. But he sees it going through Michigan, where you had Gary Peters, who's been in the incumbent since 2014. He announced that he was not going to run for re-election. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor there, declined, said she's not going to run there. The best that we might have is Pete Buttigieg to run for the Democrats in Michigan. And then Mike Rogers, who recently just ran. He was able to, in a recent poll, he was up 8 points against Pete Buttigieg in a head-to-head matchup. So I think that it's it's going to run through Michigan and Georgia. And just so you can see it here, okay, it was 6 points. Here's out of Epic. Rogers was up 6 points on Buttigieg. Now, granted, we're 2 years out. Take it with a grain of salt. But I don't really think that the Midwest wants a carpetbagger, someone from Indiana to come in who was probably the worst transportation secretary we ever had, who focused more on transgenders and DEI woke bullshit, rather than, there was a train derailment in Ohio. Where were you for those people? Especially then you get to the FAA, focused on, there were 2,000 individuals that were not hired because they would not have met the quotas that they had for minorities and women to be in the FAA. How about this? How about a crazy idea? Let's just hire people based on if they're qualified or not, and not care about their gender, sex, race, yada, yada, yada. We should care about their competency to do the job. We should not care about things that do not affect the job, period. But Michigan, that's where the GOP sees a big pickup in Georgia. Obviously, Brian Kemp, very popular governor in Georgia, who the GOP has been trying to recruit to run for that Senate seat. We're going to see. He hasn't announced yet, but he will be term limited here soon. So going against Jon Ossoff, who barely won the election in 2020 to hold that seat. So we're going to see how it all plays out at this point. But I think that Georgia most likely will flip red if you have someone like Brian Kemp run. I think he would be a great senator to represent the state of Georgia. And with Michigan, Mike Rogers isn't going to be my first pick. I think he's already announced, but we'll see who else. Let's see. We have it in Georgia. As of right now, Jon Ossoff, only one who's on the Democrat side. Obviously, he's the incumbent. People who publicly express interest. Let's see. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mike Collins, Buddy Carter, John King, potential Brian Kemp. I think this is the GOP's. This is their ruby red. Don't run with Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think she's great in the House of Representatives, but statewide, I don't think this is a seat that we want to risk. We want to take someone who's a known winner in the state of Georgia, Brian Kemp, good, strong, conservative policies. I don't think we should be messing around with a Senate seat like this. Because we could just give it right back to the Democrats if we mess up here. And the same thing goes in, let's see, Michigan here, where you've got a number of different people on the Democrat side and a couple people on the, and then on the Republican side, Mike Rogers, and then Tudor Dixon. She ran for the governorship in 22, I believe, and had lost to, in 22, and had lost to Gretchen Whitmer pretty badly. But we're going to see Mike Rogers in 2020 I don't even think he got 50% of the vote. Yeah, he only won the state by a little more than a point and a half here against John James. I think John James would also be a strong candidate in the 2026 race. We're going to see. I think that he could be a very, very, very strong candidate, though, especially with there's no incumbent. The Democrats are going to have to spend a lot of money on a primary. It's going to be an in-party fight, and I know the Democrats don't want that, but that's what they're going to have to deal with, an in-party fight. So realistically, if we're really being realistic about where this is, the GOP has basically said we're going to put a backseat to Minnesota, New Mexico, Virginia, just not in the cards. I still think Minnesota should be number 4 on the list. Michigan, I think it should go in order: Georgia, Michigan, New Hampshire, Minnesota. But I just think that there's something there with Minnesota. But that is what it is. But this is ultimately where I see it ended up. I see that the Republicans getting a 55 seat in the Senate. This is where my prediction as of right now, based on the information we have and the polling that we have. And then obviously for the Democrats, where do they have some pickup room? Obviously they can go after North Carolina, which is going to be hard, and they can go after Maine. Susan Collins, she's been a target every time she's been up for election. She's been elected, 6 times? She was elected back in 97. So she's been there for basically 3 decades at this point. So, and she'll be inaugurated, inaugurated again. Why is this not? She'll be inaugurated again here in 2027 if she wins. I am not very worried about the Maine election. We're going to need to spend a lot of money to defend that seat. But I'm not very worried about it. You look back to 2020 when she outpaced her opponent by about 8, almost 9 percentage points here. And then if you want to look at the 2020 election, let's see. Let's see if we look at Maine. And I don't really like using CNN, but, they've got a good interactive map here. Biden outran Trump by almost 10 points, 9 points here. In the same state, in the same race, that Susan Collins was able to outrun her opponent by about 9 points. She got 417, Trump got 360. She got almost as many votes as Biden got in this state. She is a very popular senator there. We're going to need to spend money to defend her there, absolutely. But I think based on how she's approached the Trump administration already, 3 weeks in, she's doubling down on what has allowed her to stay in power, to keep winning elections in Maine where really mostly Democrats win. So we're going to see how this all plays out here. But ultimately, like I said, this is my, as of right now, this is my prediction for how the election's going to go in 2026. So let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Is there anything you'd change on here? Don't forget to like, share, subscribe down below if you like this content so you never miss another video from us. But are there any changes you'd make on here? Would you rather the GOP target something else? Are there any targets that you see for the Democrats that I didn't bring up? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, have a good one. And that'll be it for today.